red light. Okay, so my name is Øystein Grøvlen. I'm here today to talk about JavaScript store programs in MySQL. I've been working on MySQL for 15 years, or more than that. And most of the time in the MySQL query optimizer. I live in Trondheim in Norway. There's more people. So, some legal stuff that if I promise something about future releases, you cannot trust me. Okay, so JavaScript application and MySQL is something that's already people are doing. It's a popular language. Both for front-end, like you have JavaScript in the browsers, that's the most common, but also you have back-end JavaScript in like Node.js and other frameworks. And there are SQL connectors that you can use in JavaScript to access the database. We have a Node.js connector. You can use a shell to connect with the XDev API. For example. However, if you have some data-intensive tasks, like you need to validate your data, you need to have some heavy string processing, you have some transformations you need to do. Such batch processing is a bit impractical to do on the client side because you have to move a lot of data over to the client. So what we want to do is to be able to have to use a rich procedural programming language on the server side. So what's the problem with moving all the data to the client? So one thing is the cost aspect, that if you have to process all this data as a client, maybe you need a thicker client, a bigger machines in order to have all the data in memory than if you do it on the big server side. And also if your client is not, you have your data in the cloud, but your client is in somewhere outside the cloud, you will have to pay a lot of money to the cloud providers to actually stream that data from the database into your client and compute stuff and on that side. There's also a latency question. It takes time to send the data to the client, and if for some tasks you may have to do several queries back and forth between the client and the database. So if you could do that on the database side, you would avoid having that overhead. And there's also the security aspect that you're sending the data somewhere else. That makes it vulnerable to someone actually picking it up and stealing your data. So it's not uncommon to use store procedures in order to access data within the database if you do batch processing like this. And you can, of course, use the MySQL supports these store programs in the SQL language already. You can use that. There's some limitations there. It's for most, I think, for most people. I'm not sure how many here have actually tried to write a store procedure in somehow. It's not. At least I feel like it takes a lot of checking the manual and trying and error to actually get it to work compared to writing something in a more language like JavaScript or Python or something which is more modern in a sense in how to express your intents. And also the JavaScript, the SQL procedures it's an interpreted language in MySQL. you have like, we have an object for every statement in your program, and then you have to execute that object, the code for this object, then go to the next statement to execute the code for that object. So it's not like, it's not compiled that you can do with most modern programming languages. And also, there's not that many resources out there if you want to write a SQL stored program. It's not like you can go on search on the net and find something that's already have been doing what you're doing, and there's no module that you can use easily like you have for like JavaScript or Python and everything. You have all these packages you can download and use as part of your application. And since there's not that many that know how to write SQL stored procedure, it's also difficult for organizations to actually get someone to do the work they need to do. So this is why we want to give an alternative, still have stored programs, but use JavaScript instead. Then you get a language that many people know. You have kind of a built-in security. I mean, JavaScript is running in many browsers, so if there's security issues, that will be be handled already. And you can actually, we have released this since 8.1. It has been possible to use this in the MySQL database service. At least I think you need to maybe have someone to enable it for you. But also, a few months ago, we actually also released a preview on Oracle Technical Network, so anyone can go down there and download a version of the Enterprise Edition of MySQL, which supports JavaScript stored programs. So even if it's Enterprise Edition, you don't have to pay anything. You can play with it, develop things, prototype things, but the license does not allow you to use it in production unless you have a MySQL subscription program. So why do we support? Why did we choose to use JavaScript for this? So this is JavaScript is one of the most used languages. 98% of all web pages uses JavaScript. There's a lot of support for it in browsers, in Node.js, and other server-side runtimes. So there's a big ecosystem of available packages that you can use with JavaScript. And also JavaScript, unlike for example Python, it's something you can run in a secure environment. I mean, JavaScript does not allow you to write things to your local file or to your send emails to someone or whatever. And it's all can be executed in a secure environment. With Python, you have all these native packages that makes it kind of insecure to use in a database setting. In order to support JavaScript, we are using the Grøvlen VM, which is an Oracle Java VM. That gives high performance. It has just-in-time compilation. So if you have run some snippet of your JavaScript many times, it will actually compile it down into Java bytecode and execute, compile the Java bytecode into native code and execute that. So you don't have the overhead of interpreting any bytecode. And also much of the JavaScript implementation is compiled down. The implementation of the language is compiled down into ahead of time, so you get an efficient execution. And Grøvlen VM also has a lot of optimizations that makes it fast. The JavaScript implementation is based on ECMAScript 2023, which is a standard for JavaScript, and that means that it's not always quite the same as what you have in Node.js. So if you have a Node.js package, it might be that you need to do some changes in order to make it meet the ECMAScript standard. And the performance for Grøvlen shows is pretty similar to what you get with the V8 engine. And Grøvlen itself, of course, this is the polyglot framework, so Grøvlen can support many different languages, and which is then compiled into Java bytecode, and so there is, but not JavaScript is the one that is, I think, one of those that are actually, there's not all that have officially like GA support. There's Python and Ruby, which is not there yet, but I think in other settings, Grøvlen is used with Java, WebAssembly, so we are running in a virtual machine, which is sandbox. So there's no, so you cannot Grøvlen control that you do not harm your local machines. So let's look a bit at what you need to do to use JavaScript stored procedures. So what we have done is that we use the standard create function that is used for existing stored SQL functions inside MySQL. But we have a new clause here, which is the language clause, which is like language is JavaScript as, and then we get the PostScript code that's embedded in this SQL statement. The process, this is actually just a string, but we have introduced some new string quoting mechanism, because if you have like a quote or a double quote here, there's a big chance that there are some conflicts with the actual JavaScript code. So if you do, we can use a double dollar here as the limits of the JavaScript code. And one advantage of this is that unless the SQL, if you define a SQL function, then as those have tried that have seen that you have to change the delimiter. For otherwise, SQL, like the SQL client, for example, will think that the first semicolon here is where the code stops. But since this now encapsulated in some delimiters already, there is no need to redefine the delimiter. The parser will understand that this is that the statement ends here, and that you will need another delimiter at the end in actually to semicolon to actually execute the create function statement. And should there be any conflicts in your code, should you have some $$ in some string in your JavaScript code, you can pick a different delimiter, put the tag in between the dollars, and then it will use the same at the end, and you will actually be able to avoid such conflicts.
Tag is free to use. The tag, does it have to be JavaScript or?
No, it can be anything as long as it needs to have the same, satisfy the same requirements that for any identifier that you can have in MySQL. So, I mean, there are symbols that you can't have in a column name, and the same symbols you can't have there, for example. And the arguments you have here, this is SQL types and SQL arguments. There you can automatically use the arguments here. So here you see that we have the two input arguments are used in the code here. There's an automatic transformation between the SQL types and the JavaScript types that are used inside in the JavaScript code. And as you see here, we are using stuff from the math library in JavaScript. The ECMAScript standard library is supported in Grøvlen. So you can use anything for that directly. So if I were to write this in SQL, I probably will use 3 times as many lines as what I'm doing here. So, do you have a question?
Yeah, does this apply to only a function, or you can actually write the script procedures?
You can use procedures too. I will show you an example. You can put procedures with input and output arguments.
And also this, since JavaScript is really type language, wouldn't cause issues if you have implicit casting inside your program. For example, if you set A in a string, JavaScript won't have a problem, but the actual function will, I guess.
You will get a runtime failure if you, because here we return. Okay. No, so if these are input arguments, you can do whatever you want after this. But like if you return something here that's a string and you specify that as an integer, then you will get a runtime error. If our converter function is not able to convert it according to the transformation rules we have between the types. So currently we support the numbers like integers, floats, and we support time types and string types like varchar, and more types will come later. So how do you use a JavaScript store procedure? You use it the same way as you use existing store procedures. So here I have defined, we used from the previous slide, we have the greatest common divisor function, returns the greatest common divisor of two arguments. And then I can use it in the select list, in the where clause, in the order by clause, or wherever you can use a function. So you can call a function. You can have a function call as an argument to another function call, and you can also mix and match SQL functions and JavaScript functions. So in this case, we will select all numbers here which have a greatest common divisor that's greater than 1, and then we will order it by that greatest common.
And the optimizer can optimize not to sufficiently well with that to not do it more than once, presumably. Because you've got in the select clause and the where and...
Good question. I'm not sure.
Which makes a big difference.
Yeah. I will have to check that. And you also here you see it used in a create a DDL statement. Yeah.
What happens, I guess it will happen during the creation of the function. And it's really possible to do it.
Potentially it could, but if it does it inefficiently, that would be
unfortunately. Function will still be efficient that way.
Yeah.
I don't think, probably it will just call it separately. I don't think we have any, but that will not be different from SQL functions.
Okay, yeah.
Is it also allowed to let functions call functions?
Yes. But you have to distinguish between different types of function here, because this is a SQL function that executes JavaScript. And if you want to call a SQL function, you need a SQL statement. And SQL statements cannot be called from functions. It can all be called, though the JavaScript functions can only call JavaScript function cannot use SQL. You have to use a JavaScript procedure in order to use the SQL. But this definition can be pretty complex because you can have, like in JavaScript, what happens here actually is that we define an anonymous function here, just put on this thing, and within functions in JavaScript, you can actually declare more functions. So this can be very long and contain multiple functions, and you can then have the main part can then call all these other functions that you actually define within your program. So that was JavaScript inside SQL, and then SQL inside JavaScript. So if you have, as I said, if you have a procedure, you can actually use SQL. And here are some examples. The top here you have a function that generates, that fills in a table with random numbers in a column called age. And we are using math functions for random and truncation and so on. And this one is using a prepared statement. So we prepare this once, and then we bind different numbers to the prepared statement and execute it. So in a loop here we are inserting multiple numbers. And we have this session object that is built in, and the session object represents the sessions that you are calling from. So you are executing within the same session as you are calling from. So whatever you do here will be in the same transaction as your original call statement. And then we use the same table. We execute select age. We compute here the average of all the ages in this table. And here we are using direct execution. So we don't prepare statements like that, but we just specify a SQL string, and then we can execute this. And then you fetch those one by one, and then you aggregate here sums to compute the average. Okay. So this is you have some one problem with SQL programs is it's kind of difficult to debug things if things go wrong. So what you can do is is the first step as developing things to debug. But in JavaScript here you can use the console object, and then you can actually log stuff, print stuff to the either standard out or standard error, and then you can select. You have a session. You have a function that you can use in your session, and then you can actually see what was printed here. So in this case, we write a warning we trace each validation of the function and print out the value. And if it's a division by zero, we throw an exception. And if you throw an exception within JavaScript and it's not caught within the function, it would actually then be converted into an SQL error. And you see, you will get if you call this function, it throws an exception, and you will actually get a SQL error back out from this. Yes?
Is there a way that that's a debugger? That's a debugger?
No.
A breakpoint?
We don't support that yet. Grøvlen can do that, so it might come in the future sometime. And you can also see the call if there's an exception. You can also see this call stacks with line numbers and so on from your last failure. So I will show an example. Okay. So I found this package on npm which actually validates different stuff like email addresses, credit cards, and stuff like that. It's just syntactic, like it looks at the email address. Could this be a valid email address or not? And I want to use that to actually check all the emails in my database to see if there's someone that's not that's invalid. So I just took the code from that file, and then I embedded all the code, all these functions that were in this package. I just say create function, validate email. I will just do the email validation part. And then I have an input string here, and it returns true or false whether it's valid or not. And then it's like language JavaScript. You use the delimiter, the double dollar, and if you look at the end, there are just this part, which calls this is the let's see, yeah. Okay, no, just there's different variants of this function here, depending on what you want to test. So I want to use the email part and then validate my input string. And return that back to the user. So the first thing I have to do, if I have not used JavaScript on this server before, I need to install the component that supports this. If you run in the cloud, that's already done. First I install the component. So now we have a different component that actually supports the where we offload the JavaScript execution, and it interacts with the Grøvlen VM to execute it. And then I just then run this. I have to store this function as you saw in a file. So I just run the if I remember what they call it. Validator.sql. Okay, and then I can, for example, so here I have a query where I have this airport DB, which has a table with passenger details that actually have email addresses. So now I just to don't execute everything here, I just check the passengers from Canada to see if their email address is valid. Then there are 176 different messages that were not valid. And you see there are things like here, for example, there's no dot something. Here there are double ampersand and things like that. So this is something, if I were to write this from scratch in a SQL store procedure, it's pretty difficult to do. Here you get something that someone is tested by many people all over the world that I can download and actually execute this as JavaScript. Let's see if I do this on the whole table, it will take some time the first time, and I don't want all the outputs here, so I just check how many emails addresses are not valid. And since this is a big table, it will take some time, but what I want to show is that when I do it the next time, the just-in-time compilation has hit in and it will go faster the next time. So while we're waiting for this, any questions? Yes?
What about community?
Community versions. So far it's not supported in community versions. We will see. I don't know. I just don't do it. Yes?
Any plans to support data languages?
Not in the short term. We want to make the JavaScript thing perfect first. Yep.
So what about support for modules? Do you plan to go all the way before Oracle database one, before Oracle MLE? You know, we have a separate horizontal module and external language
Yes.
environment. So.
That's something we want to do. They asked about modules, because as you see, it's a bit kind of cumbersome for me. I had to download this, and you still will have to do that, but I actually had to take it into an editor. I had to put my create function on top and then call it on the bottom and so on. We want to be able to have a statement that says create module and then just give it the code, the file with the code from where we downloaded it. And then we can call it from other functions that we can import it and call it from. That's something where we want to go.
The other question was, you said that the current SQL implementation of stored procedures in MySQL is somewhat limited, should we say, and has its weaknesses. Was there no thought of actually improving it? Because you can compare with, I don't know, SQL Server, maybe Oracle. There's lots of other MySQL servers that have better implementations, and potentially a better implementation would make it more likely that people might actually use it, because the weakness is to make it hard to use it for some things, and some simple improvements might have made it more attractive for certain use cases. Or do you think just going to a completely different language seems to be the better idea?
It was definitely a shorter path, because we've got all this for free from Grøvlen. It's doing all this compilation and
Plugging it in was easier, basically.
yes. So
We are out of time.
yeah, I just say that ran it the first time it took 12 seconds, and then it's down to 6. But actually, now I had initiated the just-in-time compilation probably with my Canada example. I should use the Belgian example, which will just execute a very few number of times. So
That's not
if I do it, if I done it without executing anything from before, it would take like 30 seconds, and then get it down to 6 by just income.
and that's not related to buffer pool.
No, so I have accessed this data many times before on this server.
I got a question.
Yeah.
It is possible to clone a restore constraint to the virtual machine with JavaScript. They say, don't take more than this amount of money for the memory, don't take more CPU.
Yeah. I didn't get to that part of the presentation, but you can actually restrict there's a heap, a Java heap, like in a Java VM, and you cannot go beyond that size.
Okay.
I was out of time. Okay.
Thank you very much.